we're making a clear distinction between communications that are credible threats or that amount to a campaign of harassment on the one hand. Those types of cases will be robustly prosecuted. On the other hand, where a communication is, as it were, merely offensive, grossly offensive, etc., then principles of free speech and free expression require there to be a high threshold and dictate that a prosecution is unlikely to be in the public interest in many of those cases.
And the factors which will suggest people might not be prosecuted include things like deleting it quickly if you've sobered up in the morning. Can you explain about that?
One thing that's very important in this area is that where free speech protects the subject matter, a prosecution must be proportionate. And when considering whether a prosecution is proportionate, the question of whether a communication is removed quickly, whether the individual expresses remorse, whether access to the communication is blocked, these are obviously relevant to any assessment of proportionality.
And will it be more or less likely for individuals to be prosecuted criminally now when they're using Twitter or Facebook, do you think?
It's not possible to say whether it's more or less likely. There simply haven't been enough cases. But this is clearly signalling that in those cases that are protected by freedom of expression, then there's a double safeguard, a high threshold, and consideration of the public interest before a prosecution will be brought.
Thank you very much.
Long before Sir Keir Starmer was the front-runner to be Britain's next Prime Minister, he held a very different role as the Director of Public Prosecutions DEEP, overseeing the Crown Prosecution Service. In that capacity, Starmer found himself at the heart of a growing storm around the question that still haunts democracies today. How far should the law reach into our online lives? One of the defining features of his time as DEEP was the introduction of prosecution guidelines for social media abuse, an attempt to draw the line between criminality and mere online foolishness. These guidelines, which came at a time when Twitter was still in its chaotic infancy and Facebook hadn't yet morphed into the suburban parent group chat, were meant to protect against serious online harm while safeguarding freedom of speech. But as the digital public square has grown noisier, angrier, and more consequential, the words Starmer used back then are once again under the spotlight. Free speech is not an absolute, Starmer said in 2012, unveiling the new guidelines. Yet, he also made a notable distinction, one that feels increasingly quaint in today's zero-tolerance digital climate. The justice system, he argued, should not be in the business of punishing someone who, in his words, had had a few drinks, gone online, and tweeted something offensive, only to wake up, sober up, and take it down. It was a statement that reflected the nuance of the time, a recognition that the internet was becoming a space where poor judgment was often punished with disproportionate fury. But it also opened up a difficult question. Who gets to decide what crosses the line? At the heart of the guidelines was a principle that only tweets, now posts on X, which constituted credible threats, targeted harassment, or serious hate speech should be prosecuted. Mere offensiveness, trolling, or general online idiocy, no matter how distasteful, was not meant to meet the threshold for legal action. And yet, over a decade later, the culture around online speech and the political consequences of it, the concept of being carted off for a tweet, once the stuff of hyperbole and right-wing talking points, has edged closer to reality in a handful of cases where people have been investigated or charged for what they post online. Critics from both left and right now revisit Starmer's legacy with unease. Some accuse him of being too lenient, allowing online abuse to proliferate unchecked in its early stages. Others suggest that the framework he built has been co-opted and weaponized by an ever-expanding interpretation of harm. There's irony here, too. Starmer, the man who once warned against criminalizing drunken digital ramblings, now leads a Labour Party under increasing pressure to define its stance on online freedoms. As the UK braces for the full implications of the Online Safety Act, And with future governments poised to enforce or amend it, Starmer may find himself confronting the legacy of a legal philosophy he helped shape. It begs the question, would Starmer prosecute a post that leader of the opposition Starmer might tweet? The lines between public responsibility, digital expression, and free speech have never been blurrier, and Starmer, perhaps more than any other political figure, knows just how messy that balance can be. In the end, his old caution still rings true. The context in which the message is sent matters. But in a world where screenshots are forever and the mob is always online, context is often the first casualty.
Daily Mail. Your welfare cuts will plunge 250,000 people into relative poverty, but at the same time you've accepted lavish freebies, including £600 tickets in a VIP box to watch Sabrina Carpenter. Do you regret accepting those tickets, and will you repay the money?
The 250,000 people is based on absolutely no one going into work who was previously out of work, and yet we're putting £1 billion in for targeted employment support to get people back to work. So I'm confident that our plans, far from increasing poverty, will actually result in more people having fulfilling work, paying a decent wage to lift themselves and their families out of poverty. Now, it may come as a surprise to some of you that I'm not personally a huge Sabrina Carpenter fan, being a 46-year-old woman, but a member of my family did want to go and see that concert. I'm not in a position now that I can easily just go and sit in a concert, and some of the things that I might have been able to do in my everyday life in the past are not so easy now. And so I had advice that it would be better to be in a box. The owners of the O2 had a box, tickets that are not available to buy, and they said that I could go in there, and that was better for security reasons. I do recognise that people think that that's a bit odd, but that's the reason why I did that, rather than just being in normal seats, which, to be honest, for me and my family, would have been a lot nicer and a lot easier.
Chancellor Rachel Reeves has addressed public scrutiny after it emerged. She attended a Sabrina Carpenter concert in a private box, despite admitting she is not personally a huge fan of the American pop singer. Reeves clarified that her appearance at the concert was not for personal leisure, but stemmed from security considerations, explaining that a close family member was eager to attend the show. "I'm not in a position now that I can easily just go and sit in a concert," the Chancellor said, referencing the heightened security protocols that accompany her ministerial role. The incident, which came to light after images circulated online showing Reeves at the O2 Arena in a VIP suite, has drawn both curiosity and criticism from political observers and commentators. Some have questioned the optics of a senior government official enjoying box seat privileges while the cost of living crisis continues to weigh heavily on ordinary Britons. Sources close to the Chancellor insist that the tickets were not gifted in exchange for political favour and were declared in line with parliamentary transparency rules. Nevertheless, the episode highlights the ongoing challenge ministers face in balancing private life with public expectations, particularly when personal outings intersect with popular culture. Reeves' candid admission that she is not an avid follower of Carpenter's music appears to be an attempt to draw a line between personal indulgence and official duty. This was about making sure a family member could enjoy the concert safely. "It wasn't about me having a night out," she noted. In an era where politicians are increasingly scrutinized for their personal choices and public appearances, even a trip to a pop concert can become a political talking point. Reeves, who has sought to position herself as a grounded, economically focused chancellor, now finds herself, however briefly, in the cultural spotlight. While the incident is unlikely to cause lasting political damage, it serves as a reminder of the fine line ministers tread between public responsibility and private life, and the ever watchful eyes that follow them, whether in the Commons or at a concert.